Treachery and infighting is the way of the Sith. When you have a group of individuals each striving to become the strongest of them all, inevitably they're going to step on each other's toes. When this happens, it is not uncommon for the Sith to begin plotting one another's downfall. But during the ages of the Sith Empires, both the old Sith Empire under Marka Ragnos and the ancient Sith Kings of Korriban, as well as the Dark Lord Vitiate's resurrected Sith Empire, these rules were put in place to maintain the structure and the hierarchy of the Empire itself. In this time, it was not wise for one Sith Lord to openly attack another. Despite being Sith, they had laws, a society. Murder was punishable by death. But it wasn't the murder itself that was being punished, but the foolishness of doing it out in the open. Not to mention, most Sith Lords had a network of allies, usually other Sith, in their pocket. To attack in the open would be to paint a target on your back. But there was one way for one Sith to get rid of another one legally. But it wasn't always a huge risk. It was an ancient ritual with an unknown origin, a way for one Sith Lord to formally challenge another, putting everything on the line. The ritual was named Kaggath, and it may just be the most dangerous ritual in all of the Sith culture. But first, now that you've discovered this ancient scroll, surely your hunger for knowledge is as insatiable as our own. That whispering you hear in the Force is the subscribe button promising you limitless information and power that comes with it. Give in, crush the subscribe button, and become an acolyte today. But now, my friends, let us begin with the ritual of Kaggath. The reason why the word made it sound so foreign is because a Kaggath was an incredibly sacred rite of the Sith, one that was incredibly ancient, existing before the very founding of the official Sith Order under the 12th Dark Jedi. Because of how seriously the Sith took this, it was rarely employed, but when it was, everyone strictly held to the tradition. A Kaggath is a type of a formal challenge that one Dark Lord could issue to another, but it wasn't simply a single ritualistic lightsaber duel, although that was a small part of it. In a Kaggath, the two Sith Lords were pitted against each other with all of their resources at their disposal. Their armies, their fleets, their bases, strongholds, spies, everything. During this time, many of the Dark Lords were akin to shoguns. Many of them had despots with their own private kingdoms. They often had one or several planets under their direct control, and an entire army and a navy to go along with it. This was not a simple duel. It was a declaration of a private war, a war in the style of a large-scale chess match. The goal was to outwit, to outmaneuver the opponent's forces, and to crush them or to force them to surrender. The challenger was allowed to set up the arena for the Kaggath, whether that be a single planet, a star system, or even an entire galaxy in rare places. There is a myriad of reasons why a Sith may want to declare a Kaggath. It could be vengeance to right a wrong, a battle to reclaim honor, pure greed, or simply because they disliked one another and wished to facilitate their own downfall. The one challenged had the option of whether or not to accept. However, if one declared a Kaggath, then the challenger would automatically attain the other Sith's rank. So there is definitely an obligation to accept it, but there was a reason why it was so rarely employed. The stakes were insanely high. A Kaggath was a battle where both combatants would put not only their lives on the line, but everything they held dear, including their reputations, their memories. It was all put on the gambling table, their very legacy. The victor would absorb all of the rank, class, assets, women, children, everything that their opposition held. Or if they chose, they could destroy them completely. The winner also had the right to annihilate their opponent's entire legacy, wiping their very records from the pages of Sith doctrine, effectively expunging the very memory of them from history itself. Simply put, everything that the loser had was at the mercy and whim of the winner. This was why it took a lot of hatred and ambition for a Sith to invoke this ancient rite of passage, an ancient rite of destruction. Once the one was challenged accepted, the ritual began immediately, and when we say immediately, we mean it. At one point in the lore, a Sith by the name of Lord Falatasar declared a Kaggath against a Darth Tormen. When the ritual began, the two Sith Lords were on the world of Ziost. The moment that Darth Fatalasar declared Ziost to be the staging ground, Darth Tormen instantly decapitated his opponent while he was still speaking. Fatalasar's first mistake was naming a planet that they were currently standing on, thus giving Tormen the liberty to strike before the war ever commenced, and his second mistake was doing so while in arm's reach of his enemy. This one was probably the quickest Kaggath in the entire lore history, but Tormen was smart and he got off easy, because this type of ritual had very strict rules. The first rule was that a Kaggath could only be declared by a Sith who was recognized by the Dark Council as having sufficient power and authority. Not just any apprentice or warrior could decide to challenge a lord. There was a rigid social hierarchy in the Empire. and most of the time, only two Sith Lords on equal social or militaristic standing could enter a Kaggath with one another. But there were exceptions. What was typically accepted though was that the stakes had to be high enough on both sides, otherwise it was not worth declaring at all. Two low-level Sith may just as well whack at each other with lightsabers to settle their disputes. The ritual was only for the mighty who were ready to lose everything to destroy their enemy. The second rule was that it was an exclusive war. Battles could not be waged with any sort of outside help whatsoever. After all, a Kaggath is a direct confrontation of one Sith's power and assets against another. It is a direct comparison, if you will. They were not allowed to form alliances with other worlds or other Sith. There were no sponsors, no benefactors. It was the one thing that the Sith could never cheat, because the consequences of cheating were dire. The breach of any rule of the right resulted in the execution of the offender by the other Sith not involved. Usually, they were directly executed by the Dark Council, but besides this exception, no one was allowed to intervene on a Kaggath until it was finished. Perhaps only the Sith Emperor could force it to end, but to date, the Emperor has never done this. A Kaggath only reaches conclusion when one side is defeated or surrenders, and the prevailing Sith choosing whether to eliminate his enemy, or even worse, keep them alive, as this was humiliating. Legitimately one of the most humiliating things that can occur with a Sith Lord. The history runs deeply in the ancient Sith roots, and apparently Tulak Horde and Mark Aragnos had both competed in Kaggaths at various points in history, possibly even leading to their positions as the Dark Lord of the Sith. Tulak Horde's Kaggath was against Aloysius Kallig, and upon his victory, Tulak had Aloysius removed from history. His family line was also meant to be wiped out, but they managed to flee and survive. But their noble blood eventually descended into slavery. Apparently Ludo Kresh also participated in a Kaggath, possibly against his greatest rival Naga Sadow. But despite the very strict rules laid out, not every challenge went the way that one would assume. During the early days of the reconstituted Sith, Darth Victon and a Sith named Kalar entered a Kaggath with one another. Their battle resulted in the destruction of the Imperial Citadel, and after this, the two decided to call a truce. But not only were the members of the Dark Council furious at the two for destroying the Citadel, but a truce was against the rules. There could only be a single winner. Calling it even wasn't just a disgrace to the ancient ritual, it was an insult after they had destroyed the ancient Citadel. Both Kalar and Victon were executed by the members of the Dark Council for their crimes. Both of their families were slaughtered publicly, and all of their assets went towards its reconstruction. One of the last known Kaggaths in history was between Darth Thanaton and Darth Knox. Thanaton had been trying and failing to get rid of Knox, but all of his schemes were failing, and so he declared a Kaggath on him so that he could simply destroy the Sith with his own power. However, he got a lot more than he bargained for when he was defeated on the world of Corellia. Wounded, Thanaton fled back to Korriban to seek the aid of the members of the Dark Council, attempting to deceive them by not revealing that he had called a Kaggath. Knox, however, had followed him back to the council chambers, and the two concluded their duel there. Thanaton was left mortally wounded, but when it came out that he had declared a Kaggath and had broken the rules by asking for the help of the council, he was executed by a Sith by the name of Darth Mortis. Mortis, who at the time was the lord who presided over the sphere of laws and justice in the ancient Sith Empire. But that, my friends, was a Kaggath ritual. This is probably the most dangerous Sith ritual in all of their culture, one that has little to do with actual sorcery, but everything to do with their dangerous social law. Personally, I'm rather curious to know what a Kaggath would look like in the days of a modern Sith Empire. It probably wouldn't work in the Rule of Two, but perhaps it could function in Darth Krayt's one Sith. The Dark Lords aren't really shoguns that they were in yesteryear, but I believe that it would still be something of a spectacle to see two Sith enter a ritualistic combat with real tangible rules that both are forced to respect. It's definitely a product of a bygone era, a time when the Sith honored themselves as kings and acted as such. But what do you think, my friends? Would you want to see a Kaggath explored in a bigger setting, such as a show or a book? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, thank you so much for visiting the archives, and may the Force be with you.